Welcome to the Joy Work Show. I'm your host, Diane, and this is the podcast where we dig into the work that brings us joy and the joy that fuels our work. It is the podcast where we know that the greatest joy is often found after and amongst the greatest challenges. Every week, we bring you conversations that inspire, challenge, and move you forward in both life and business. And our first episode of 2025, Happy New Year, by the way. And today's episode is no exception. We're talking about life coaching, what it really is, why it matters, and how it can help us step into the lives we want to live instead of the ones we think we should. I'm joined by the brilliant Kathryn Ball, who's sharing her journey from the corporate world of HR to becoming a life coach. Together, we explore the power of one-on-one coaching, the courage it takes to break free from societal expectations, and why the word should might just need to be shown the door. The episode is packed with insights and inspiration to help you embrace your choices, build your confidence, and move towards a life that feels true to you. So whether you're on the commute today, whether you're still snugly at home under a blanket finishing off the holiday period, out for a walk, whatever you are doing, you don't want to miss this. So let's go. Hi there, Kathryn, and welcome to the Joy Work Show. I am so delighted to have you with us today, and I cannot wait for our listeners to hear your story. So if you could start by telling us who you are, what you do, and how you got here.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. First of all, Diane, it's really lovely to be here. I always love having a chat with somebody. So I am a life coach, and I know that's a bit of a question mark for people. Not a lot of people I know actually will often say life coach, even if that's what they have trained in. We're often encouraged to use some other kind of very specific terminology. Well, I'm slightly bucking the trend on that front at the moment. We'll see if that bites me in the bum later, but I actually love the fact that I am a life coach because I'm very much of the belief that it's everything in context, everything in the round. So yes, inevitably, I will talk to people about work, what they do. Perhaps there's parenting and other things as well that come into the picture because it's all in the round and all in the context of your life. And how I became one, I'll be completely honest, a bit of a happy accident. So my background is about sort of 16 years in HR. That was also a bit of a happy accident, but it was a career that I really enjoyed and I loved it for many, many years. And I stumbled across coaching one year. I remember what happened. It was that, period between Christmas and New Year, that's like no man's land. I was commuting back into work. It was very early, very dark, very grey, a bit of a post-Christmas lull. And I was scrolling, as you do, on social media, and someone was talking about coaching. And I was like, wow, what is this? I immediately thought, this sounds fascinating. I really want to know more about this. And she was looking for people to coach. And I thought, I need to know more about this. So my interest was kind of twofold. And it was the start of a really amazing and positive experience for me. It was like a little piece of a jigsaw I didn't necessarily know I was missing at the time. And it was the start of my journey qualifying as a coach whilst I was still working HR, and then being brave enough from having the coaching to realise that's actually what I want to do moving forward.
So for those of people who don't know what a life coach is, how do you work with your clients? What is the fundamentals of what a life coach does?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting point because a lot of people, we use the term coach when they may mean something a little bit different. There's not necessarily a right or wrong here. It's just being clear about what you understand by it. So some people say they're a coach when they actually are perhaps more, in fact, a mentor, for example, or a trainer, or, other sort of similar professions. And they're all connected and they all have the really good intentions of supporting people. So for me, how I've learned it as coaching is that you're there as a support, but not in an instructive way. You're helping someone discover things for themselves. And that sounds so straightforward, doesn't it? And you think, do I really need a coach for that? And the truth is, for some people, perhaps you don't. I think for many of us, the advantages of working with a coach it's manifold, to be honest, because a coach can sometimes just see things that maybe you don't see so readily yourself, help you open up some more options, some more thinking that you don't really see for yourself. And the beauty is, with a coach, the relationship isn't one someone that's right next to you, that's in your life with an invested interest, like your family, like your sister or your well-meaning parent, or even your partner, when they have knowledge of you and think, oh, you're really good at this, you should just, and sometimes the intention is really good, but it's not dealing purely with the person in front of you. And I work mainly on a one-to-one basis, and I absolutely love that, because whilst coaching at its heart for me is the same, it's continuous, it's consistent, in the sense of who's turned up in front of me, let's approach this with kindness, curiosity, interest, and see where we can move forward this person. And a lot of the things that we cover will be the same. It'll be things like, well, I doubt myself, I go around in circles and I'm not sure, and I compare, and I do all these other things. Those things are fairly consistent. The thing that's always different is the person in front of me. And that's what I think the beauty is of life coaching. I can't think I'll ever get bored of it.
No, it's such an interesting thing. So how would you say it differentiates from, so say somebody who says they are a business coach or a mindset coach or a self-belief coach? How do you see putting yourself as a life coach differentiates from that?
I think it's just that ability to, nothing's off limits. And this is the tricky thing. I've literally been thinking about this morning, the whole niche, how far do you go with it, how specific? And I totally understand why people do focus in on something like, I am a confidence coach or business coach. I get that. And you kind of, people know, I think they have an understanding at least what to expect from working with a business coach. It will be for the interests of my business, and we'll perhaps talk about some ideas and income generation and sales and all those things, which are all absolutely valid. For me, the life coaching part is, well, how does this all fit into the picture that is your life? And I think that is so important, because it's all very well and good when we hear about these ideas and suggestions of things that we can do, but if we know that that's very difficult to translate in my circumstances, perhaps I've only got one day a week I can turn my hand to my business at the moment, perhaps I have childcare, perhaps I have caring responsibilities, and it can be very frustrating, can't it, to think I want to apply all of this amazing stuff, but it doesn't fit in the reality of what my life is. And so with life coaching, for me, it's like, what is the reality for you right now? And maybe let's acknowledge that's not forever. So let's work with what we have got right now, and then we reassess as we go. That's the other beautiful thing. And this applies for all coaching, to be honest with you. It is, I hate to use the word journey. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you don't stay in the same spot.
There's no better word, though. There is no better word.
It works, right?
Explaining exactly.
You've moved along, you've arrived at a different destination. So, for example, in coaching together, we might be talking about your route to get to America. Then the next time we talk, maybe you've stopped off in Europe somewhere. Fantastic. Is that the right place for you to be? Are we still looking for America, or are we heading to Australia instead? You adjust and decide and make decisions as you go. The important thing is that you are making decisions, you are acting, and it's in the interests of your circumstances, your context, your life, for where you are right now and where you want to go.
So obviously, I know life coaching sometimes gets a really bad rap, and we have spoke about this in the past. So where do you think that some of the negative connotations? Now, I think coaching as a whole can get some negative connotations, but where do you think that life coaching, where does that come from, and where is the misunderstanding between that this is actually a thing that can help your whole life and is a completely, like you say, the whole round, the whole holistic experience? Where do you think the disconnect has been with that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So to point out, first of all, coaching itself as an industry is not currently regulated. So anyone can call themselves a coach. Now, I'm not going to sit here and be really precious about it. I'm much more interested in who the person is, what they've got to offer, and how good they are. So I am a qualified coach, but does that necessarily mean I'm a better coach for X person than anyone else? Maybe not. It's actually about the right fit, the intentions, the ethics, all of the stuff that comes with it. And that can come qualified or not. Having said that, I am really grateful for having learned my craft, if for want of a better expression, the way that I did, because it was really eye-opening. I'd come from HR, where HR is a very much a try and fix and problem solve. The approach for coaching is very different. It's not that someone requires fixing, they just perhaps need some support to get where they want to go. So that's the first point about coaching as a whole. Now, life coaching, this is interesting because I think it's sometimes perceived as like the poor relation. It's a catch-all, encompasses anything, it's therefore very wishy-washy, very vague. I understand that because it is something that you see the term and you might just glaze over and lose interest completely. I understand that, but actually I think it's really potent and really powerful for that very specific reason that, as I said, when I work with a client one-to-one, it's like we're in a bubble together and it's in the context of their life. Because we can take all of those wonderful ingredients, the stuff about perhaps if they're self-employed, their business, perhaps if they're employed, how they feel about their career progression or their relationships at work and all of those things. But we're joining the dots to the other things that are going on in their lives because it's all connected. You are one person. You're the glue in the middle of all of those things. And if one thing is out of kilter, it's going to start having an impact on the other ones. So I think it's like trying to have a more rounded view rather than just pinpointing on one thing and expecting that's the solution I'm looking. This is where I've got the problem. We fix that, everything else will be okay. And yes, there might be some truth to that, but we need to look perhaps a little bit. It's like the periphery vision, isn't it? Look around the edges as well, see what's going on, because there will always be clues.
No, and that's exactly it. And I think it's so important. And I've known people who have gone through life coaching who it has completely transformed where they were at that point in their life and the way they now do things. And some of them have continued to stay with life coaching for years and years and years, and others didn't, but used it at that time, often through a time of transition or a massive time of change within their lives. Because like you say, you might have a great support system around you, but sometimes your friend, your sister, your partner, your mother might not be the right person to truly support you through that transition, because you just might need a little bit more, or you just need that bubble, like you say, to be as honest as you need to be, which we can't always be with the people closest to us because there is emotions and feelings and politics
Absolutely.
and everything involved in that. So it's so interesting to hear that. And I do think that the coaching industry and the word coach does have a negative impact, but I think to different people each thing does. Like, I spent so long staying away from the word coach until that's how my clients were introducing me to people. And I was like, okay, I really need to start calling myself a business coach. I really need to start saying that that's something that I do. Was I'd been calling myself a strategist because that is what I do. The fundamentals of what I do lies in strategy. But I was asking about their lives. It does have to be a holistic look at how I work with my clients. I do need to know them personally to know what's going to work from them. And like you say, if they're only working in the business 1 day a week, or if they're working 5 days a week, or if they've got children, or what their dreams are and what their visions are. And that's where the coaching comes in, the coaching and mentoring comes in. But I spent so long trying to get away from that I was like, I don't quite know what I'm running away for. And it's been much clearer since I've just stepped into that, because that's exactly how my clients saw me. So what I love that you're doing is that you are trying to almost rebrand life coaching to say, no, this is what it is, this is what I do. And also the fact that you love working one-to-one with your clients. So what is the magic that you believe is in that one-to-one space? Because so often we're told that we should be doing group coaching and courses and all of the things, and those have their place. I do them. I have a membership where I group coach, so I do believe in its power, but I also love one-to-one. So what magic do you believe that holds?
It's a really good point, because I too believe there is definitely a place for group coaching and programs, and they have different sort of different atmosphere. You have the relationships with other people, but the beauty with one-to-one is, I think, as long as you're working with the right coach, it's that ability to be completely open and honest and transparent, and that is, to be honest, at the heart of what will make coaching effective for you. And you hit on a really good point there about that little bit of distance. It's the impartiality. I found people who say that it's very easy for them to open up and say things to me that they don't necessarily want to say to their own partner or family, partly because it perhaps might even connect to them and their relationships and so on. And it's all very much about you and you living your life, which we're all trying to do as best as we can. And just latching on to another point you mentioned there about transitions, I'm a big believer in we have these life chapters. And when I could think back to that HR career that I mentioned of 16 years, I guess there were little sub chapters in there, but it was like the big career chapter and it could have just kept on going. It took me quite a long time to realise I was allowed to sort of write a different chapter. And later on, I'll probably choose another chapter again after this. And that's also fine. We don't have to have this kind of path wonderfully set out forevermore into the distant. Life doesn't really let us do that anyway, does it? Let's be honest.
No, it doesn't.
We get to sort of write and influence what's going on in the current chapter. And these can be big shifts and they can be small shifts, and they are both really important and really powerful to how we are feeling and how we are thinking and how we are behaving. So for me, that one-to-one bubble is that really wonderful space where you'll have no judgment from me, which I think is also really important, because I think we can easily feel judged, can't we? You go onto social media and you'll make comparisons, even if you don't necessarily mean to. Oh, wow, look how well this person's doing. God, it must be so easy for them. And we make all these assumptions, but of course, social media is a very filtered view of life. I think talking with a life coach is almost like you hitting that sort of reality button, but with a massive dose of kindness. We start with what is, and then we work out what you really want. And I think the beauty of that in a one-to-one container is it's absolutely bespoke to you. There's no worry about, well, is this what this person also wants? It's on the group coaching call, or I don't want to take up too much time and I don't want to make it all about me. The beauty of coaching in the one-to-one spaces is all about you. That's all there is. And we don't really get that in life, do we? Do we really get that much time to talk about, think about, and focus just on ourselves? It feels a bit selfish, doesn't it? But I actually think it's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, I think it is as well. And I love shared spaces more than I thought I would have when I started my business in September 2023. And I really enjoy community aspects, and I really enjoy hearing other people's stories and the way they're doing things and them sharing. But I know for me to get really, really deep and really start removing blocks and move forward personally, I need the one-to-one space, because my ego will always take over in those shared spaces and not fully allow me to be as transparent as perhaps I need to be. There's been a few instances in some really magical spaces where it has dropped slightly and I've been able to share, so it can work in. But I think the one-to-one is when you really, really can start to get some breakthrough. And I think it's really important to have the mixture in our lives, and really kind of open ourselves up. And one thing that I love about life coaching and the way you talk about it is, in this online space, so many things are just driven to business owners, small business owners, entrepreneurs, and that's where coaching sits. And when we're in that bubble, that's what we can think. Where actually life coaching is for everybody. And I think it's really important for people to realise that no matter if they're sitting in employment, if they are a CEO of a company, if they are a mum, it doesn't matter, and everything in between. I think that there can be real benefits for life coaching, and the strategies that you can use for both in business and not in business can be applied to life. And I think there's real gaps for people to realise that is open to them too.
Yeah, absolutely. The truth is, I think for most people, there would be an advantage or a benefit that they would experience from it, as long as they are open to it. And yes, there are moments where I'm not saying it's all rosy. It's sitting in some of that discomfort, because when you start with that kind of radical honesty, yes, it can feel a bit uncomfortable, but it's in our interests to be really aware of what is, because there might be things that we are doing or not doing that is contributing to that. And we like to sometimes point the finger elsewhere, but equally it can help us identify those external factors that are having an influence as well. So yeah, I think most people could benefit one way or another.
Yeah. And I loved what you said about chapters. I'm lucky enough that I feel I've had quite a few chapters in my life now. And when I look back, I am so delighted with some of the transition and changes. And they do feel like chapters because there's elements of it when I look back that's like looking at somebody else's life from where I am now, good and bad.
Yeah.
And I also think there is this kind of discourse that, particularly as women, when we get to a certain age, that we just kind of need to wait it out now. That's kind of life over, and there's nothing exciting left ahead of you. Whereas I don't feel like that. Like, I started my business, as I say, in September 2023. This is my first podcast episode, came out yesterday as we record this. And I've got so much ahead of me and so much exciting times ahead of me. I've got 2 young children. I've got adventures to go on and life to live. And just because I've had quite a few chapters so far doesn't mean that it's over, and doesn't mean that I can't change and grow and experience and be just because I'm a woman of a certain age. And I think it's so important for that message to get out there to people who are sitting there and perhaps feeling that way, because let's face it, no matter how much we try, that messaging is still there.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, let's be honest, the chapter's not over until the book's written, done, and and life is actually over.
Yeah.
So there's always another chapter, small, large, big difference, small difference. And yeah, I didn't realise that. Like I said, I was in that massive HR chapter for a long time until that was for me a big chapter switch up when I decided to leave that career, become a life coach. I also have moved. I don't live in the London suburbs anymore. I live on the south coast of Devon. There's been some big changes, but I'm now in the midst of, I'd say, another chapter. But I know there are others to come, and it isn't still. I mean, that's a cliche to say it isn't too late, but sometimes I think people still think, oh, but it is for me, and I don't want anyone to be using that for me at the end, because says who?
Exactly.
What is it you really want? And I think that's where to go back to. A lot of people perhaps don't really know what it is they want, or they think there's certain things that they should want, but actually maybe they don't want them anymore, and they're allowed to want something different.
No, completely, that's it. And I think I love that for me. I love that because we see the 70-year-old woman that just started writing novels and has now got a Sunday Times bestseller. We see the man who was really unhealthy in life and get fit at 65, but we see these as like one-offs. We see these as people saying, go, that's amazing for them, but it's not for me. But we have to change that. We have to respect older age. We have to realise that we are a growing in age population, that 40 doesn't mean you're going to fall off the edge of a cliff now, even if when you were 18 you looked at 40-year-olds and thought that's exactly what was going to happen. But you get there and you realise there's so much more, and you don't actually feel that much different. Your back just might hurt a wee bit more some. And I'm an older mum, so I've got young children that I have to be full of vitality for and things like that. And it's just that thing of, it's got to be for everybody. We have to change this conversation around that that it's got to be done. And like you, I had a big job, I had a big career for 20 plus years, and I thought that was my full identity. I thought I couldn't be anything if I wasn't that person. And it took me becoming a mum to realise that, because I'd always known there was so much more, and there was elements throughout my career that I attempted to do little things, but I worked crazy hours, so it never quite came to anything. But it took a fundamental change, a fundamental transition for me to go, there has to be something else, there has to be something more, because I now have children I want there to be more for. But I just think that age thing is, we really need to kill it. We need to get rid of it. We need to, move it on, and people need to realise that there's chapters still to be written.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is hard because we do get used to thinking a certain way. It is like it's a road well travelled. And if we start to tell ourselves that this is it for me now, this is my path, and I stay on it, come what may, that kind of thinking will just sort of stay with us unless we are able to consciously accept a possible new thought, something a bit different for us. And it's not always easy. And I'm not here to say that life coaching is this wonderful magic wand. We swoop in, we fix things. It's not like that at all. But it is about opening up new possibilities. And yes, I'm very much in that midlife area now. And it's a funny old thing, actually, because I've also found with midlife comes a new level of, I think, acceptance about who I am and the kind of person I am. And I'm kind of at peace with that. But there's still that extra piece of, so what do I do with it? What do I want to be in my next chapter? What will it look like for me at work? But obviously, as a life coach, I'm going to say, and at home and in life in general. And it often comes down to a lot more simple things. I used to be very much about the career ladder, want to go far up it, but now I realise, it's quite dizzy at the top, and I'm actually happier on the ladder next door. Different rung. It's so much, but it's right for me now. That's the other thing. What was right for you in your 20s and your 30s, it might look different in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and it's possibly quite right that it should do so. But you make the choices to adapt for that next chapter. I'd love for it to become like a real norm, this rewriting of chapters as we go along, rather than.
I think so too, and I would just love. You used a word right at the beginning of the podcast. We were talking about your own journey, and you said about making the brave leap when you left your career. And I just wish more people were able to make the brave leap. My favourite words when working with my clients are bold, brave, and courage. And I really, really believe that with support, everybody can make brave choices, take bold actions, and have courage to have the life that they want. And I guess what you're saying is life coaching can be the key that can help them get there, because it is that support to when you don't feel confident. Like, we know confidence is learned. Courage is innate. Courage comes from your heart and your tummy and your gut. Confidence is learned experience. So if people don't have those learned experiences, life coaching can support them to start having those learned experiences, that they can do hard things, they can make bold choices, and they can change the life that they want. And I think that's really, really important, because I think people lose that as they get older. And I think that's part of the messaging, that, you just have to kind of stick to your lot.
I think, unfortunately, people look at it backwards. Courage, to me, definitely comes first. The confidence comes after. I think people think, I'll wait to be confident and then I'll have the courage to do X. And that's, unfortunately, the flip way of looking at it. You have to be a little bit bold. And I know that's scary. I totally get that. My own experience was that it was the coaching that I had that helped me understand, this is the direction I want my life to go in. And it has to be me that makes that happen, because I can't keep saying to myself, oh, I'll move at some point. I will do this at some point. When is that some point going to be? What am I waiting for to make that happen? There is no such thing as a perfect time. We talk about it, we joke about becoming a parent at the right time. When is that mythical right time?
I can't see any time that would ever be a right time, ever.
Yeah, you have to be the one that's prepared to sort of make that happen. And I know that it's scary, but then the confidence grows afterwards.
And I think and it's probably a really British thing to not want to sit up and say, these are the things that I want, this is who I want to be, and I'm going to go and get them. Whether it's life, whether it's business, whatever it is, it's such a thing to just be, no, we'll just be quiet, we'll just be happy with your lot, and yes, gratitude is super important. Looking around you and seeing what you already have is a huge part of accepting and growing, but it's also okay to say you want more, or more of something different. And I just think it's really important that people know that that is a choice that they have out there, that they can get the support. It's not just for the few, it can be for the many.
Definitely.
Okay. So part of this podcast, as you know, is that we ask 3 questions all about joy. and I asked you to prepare them beforehand, so I've already had a little sneak peek into what you're going to say. So the first thing is the inspired by joy, something or someone or something that has inspired you on your journey to where you have got to now. And what would yours be?
So yeah, so many things that we could say to this, isn't it? I didn't necessarily want to just highlight one particular person, because I think I've been inspired by many women in business. It's actually the antithesis of that comparison piece where you start to feel inadequate in comparison. I find it inspiring to see other women doing things also a bit imperfectly as well, and being honest about it. That I really respect, that I really admire. But I've chosen a book, and to be honest, it's a book that I think it should just be something that everyone in their life should read. Again, happy accident for me. I think someone did recommend it to me, and I'm embarrassed, I can't remember who it was, but I highly recommend it. It's called The Choice. It's by Edith Eger, and talk about an amazing sort of second act. She's still alive. She's 97. I did actually check yesterday. She is such an amazing woman. The Choice is about her life. And you'd think the part that she would really focus on is the fact that she is a survivor from Auschwitz. I mean, that immediately sort of grabs your attention. And I'll be honest, that part of the book is a very uncomfortable read, because you have an understanding of what that experience might have been like. And you know it's not going to be pleasant, and there's an awful lot of suffering. And, you know, she was only, I think, 15, possibly 16 at the time. And at least you know that she survives. We think, what about people around her? So it's quite an uncomfortable read, but that's not the premise of the book. The Choice is about how she chose to live her life afterwards, and what an amazing journey it has been, and the support that she offers to other people. And she doesn't come, this is the bit that I really love, she doesn't come to those relationships with clients with the kind of like, look what I've been through, you've got nothing to complain about. Everyone's pain is just what they experience, right? Everyone's feelings are what, whether it's, you know, about, she talks about the woman who didn't get her car was scratched or something, versus a woman who'd lost her child, but they just know the pain that they are experiencing. And she doesn't sort of come from an angle of, look what I've been through, you've got nothing to complain about. It's just about working with and supporting those people. She's led this phenomenal life since that experience. So I highly recommend that as a very inspirational read.
I love that, and that fits perfectly into what we're talking about in chapters. She hasn't let one chapter define who she is, and she's used her pain and her power to help other people. That is such a beautiful story. So just remind people what that book is called and the person.
Yeah, so it's called The Choice, and it's by Edith Eger. She has written more, but that one in particular I just thought was such a powerful. I've reread it since, and I think I'll periodically pick it back up again, because there's always going to be something new and insightful that I pick up. Yeah.
And she's 97, which, wow, is amazing. So the other one's the Joy Spotlight, a favourite thing that has shaped your business or your work.
Okay, so I've been greedy. I've picked two, so I'll just cover them quickly.
Absolutely
so the first one, I put finding your alternative to colleagues. I think is so important when you're self-employed and small business owner. The thing that I miss most from my employment days are my wonderful colleagues. I had the best colleagues, and it's just that ability to have those moments, those breathers, that bit of downtime, or to bounce ideas, or just to check in. You don't get that an awful lot when you're on your own as a small business owner. You're making all the decisions, you're wearing all the hats. And I think if you can find your alternative to colleagues in self-employed space, that's really important. And I'm very lucky to say that I've got some wonderful fellow coach friends and fellow small business owners, and they get it. That's the other beautiful thing, is the transition it is a very different experience going from employed to self-employed. So when you're talking to other people who are self-employed, they really get it. The highs that are very high, the lows can feel unbelievable. The loneliness, the fact that you feel so responsible, that you have to be so visible, whereas you're not under that, what I call the employer umbrella, that slightly safer space where you're known sometimes for the organisation you work for, whereas self-employed, it is just you. So that was my first thing. And the second thing, which is very topical, podcasting. So late to the game, but now it's kind of threefold for me. I absolutely love listening to a podcast while I'm out walking. So it's a double win for me. I'm getting two two good things in there. I'm getting some. I think it's one of the only times I think I can genuinely say I can multitask. They say multitasking is actually a fallacy. I think, well, I can actually listen and walk at the same time. I actually managed to do both those things and do them both hopefully fairly successfully. So yeah, I love listening while I'm out walking. Love guesting, as having a chat with someone else in business, and I do have my own now. It's in very early days, and I absolutely love it.
And we spoke about this briefly before we started recording about the podcasting, and I said I only started listening a few years ago when I was pregnant with my first wee girl, and I tapped into the kind of parenting podcast, mum podcast type things, and loved it, and it suddenly became like my source of knowledge and my source of community and my source of learning. And I have been absolutely addicted. I was a complete music addict before, and now I would say I'm a complete podcast addict, and I'm never not listening to a podcast in the car, and quite often I'm listening to a podcast whilst I work as well. So yeah, I absolutely love them. And obviously I've now got this podcast too. And I just think it's stories for me that are the reason that I love podcasting. I love hearing people's stories. That's the podcast that I enjoy the most. And it's the reason why I enjoy doing these guest podcasts too. Is I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing the journey. I love hearing everything in between, and I absolutely love that. And in terms of finding your colleagues in the self-employed space, it's exactly why I started the Joy Work Club, completely on a whim, because I realised 2 months into my launching my business that I was lonely and I didn't have a community. I thought I was a lone wolf, and realised that yes, I can be, and yes, I am much comfortable in my own space, but I realised that the teams that I'd been building for the last 20 plus years before that were my support, were my reason, were my why, were the community that I needed, and support doesn't need to be this big complicated thing. Sometimes support is just belonging to something and feeling part of something, and I really wanted to do that. Couldn't quite find a place where I felt comfortable, so I made it, and that was so important to me. And since then I've joined other communities and I think it's a really important part of being a successful human being, I would say, is, to have that community and that support and to look for that. Because when we lose that connection, don't think we realise how much that we are losing.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. The last one is the joy killer, the things we want to put in the bin, don't want to see in the world ever again.
Yeah, but there's quite a few. You know what? I'll just focus on one actually, and it came to me this morning which one I should really focus on, and it's a very, very simple, small little word. It's the word should. It does an awful lot of damage. Or as a really lovely coaching friend said to me once, and I thought, wow, and this is so apt. You'll see why. She said, nothing does more to suck the joy out of life than the word should, and make us feel inadequate. And it's such a loaded word, and yet it's one that I think it's in our vocabulary so easily. And yet, what does it really mean? So, when I hear the word should, I do think now, check in with that. What's the pressure? What's the obligation? Where's it coming from? According to who, for starters, who is that? Should I be doing this for? But also, if you think about it, when you say something like, oh, I should do X, it's not the same as saying, I want to do X or I will do X. Where is the commitment? Where is the drive? And where is the ownership? And it stems, it could go a lot deeper than we're probably going to have time to talk about today, because sometimes it is something that we want, but it just feels like it's hard to get. It's too far away. Like, I should feel more confident.
Mm-hmm.
There probably is some truth in that. But a statement like that's not really going to get us very far, unfortunately. We also have the shoulds that come from other external pressures, like, oh, I should be married by now. I should be a homeowner, all those kind of societal expectations. And I think that can lead us on, as we spoke about earlier, that kind of sort of path. We feel like this is my life panning out, and I'm not choosing the chapters and the directions that I want it to take. So I'm guilty still of using it myself. I can't hold my hands up and say I'm perfect, and that I don't forget to put should in the bin sometimes, but that is what I think can be an absolute joy killer.
Do you know what? I couldn't agree more. And I have never, ever thought about it. And I'm now replaying. So we've had a couple of challenging weeks in this house. In fact, November has been a very difficult month in this house. Lots of different reasons that I won't go into just now. We are fine. It's just been difficult. And I look back, and quite often when I am in a challenging space or a place of lack or feeling a little bit more, or my doubts loud, that type of space, I hear much more negative language come into play, and I realise when it's happening. But you've now made me realise a whole new word that has definitely been happening, and it is should, because there might be, like, Ash might say to me, do you want to watch a movie tonight? And I will be, I should be working. Do you want to, shall we put the girls down and have a nice dinner tonight? Or I should be sorting out the clothes tonight. And I realise, like, you might, if you're watching this on video, you might see the realisation has suddenly come over my head of how often this conversation plays out. And then how often, how I feel when somebody else says to me, well, you should be doing that by now. Or even about the girls. Well, should they not be walking, talking, dry at night, potty trained? Should they not be this? And honestly, it's like a wave of realisation is just coming over me how loaded and irritating that word is.
Yeah. I've planted it now. You're going to spot it.
I know. I'm going to be like, banned. That word is banned from this house because it is so loaded and it is so negative. And no matter whether you're saying it to yourself or somebody else, I think my answer is always going to be, well, why should I?
Yeah.
Who gets to tell me that? No. And the society, that is, I don't know if that's my favourite one yet. There's been some goodies, but wow. Yeah, should. I hope you're all going to ban it from your houses, everybody, because I have just, that's like slapped me across the face, how negative that is.
It certainly can be. I think it can be unfortunately, one of two ways. It's either the throwaway, like I'm not really committed to it,
Yes.
or it's loaded with other expectations and baggage and, like, oh, I should run a mile before dinner, that kind of stuff. And it's like, I think it has like double hitter potential. So if you spot it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's that thing as well. It's that element of, and I think quite often when I'm in a negative space, the words I try and use is I get to. So when I am like, oh my God, I've got to take the girls to nursery this morning. I've got to then do this and I've got to then do that. I'm like, no, hang on a minute. I get to do that. I am healthy. My children are healthy. We're lucky enough they're going to nursery so that I can also work. I get to do that this morning, Diane. What are you going on about? You get to do these things. So when something became a burden is now just something lovely I get to do. So I think it's that, but I just hadn't realised how much should was part of the discourse that we have been having, particularly recently. And as soon as you said it, it was like a movie in my head of all these conversations. And also when people have been saying to me, should your children not be doing this now? Should your children not be doing that now? But it'd be constant. But look at all the things they can do. Look at all the things that they get to do every day. And I think it's really important for us to realise that choices and the decisions we make for our life are exactly that. We get to decide today what that looks like, regardless of what happens, regardless of things that happen in our life. We still get to make choices, how we react, how we deal with it, how we show up, and how we can train ourselves. It's habits that you can retrain because we've got into those negative habits. My 2-year-old doesn't say, Mummy, I really should be potty trained by now. She doesn't say that. She just gets up and enjoys her life, So we're learning these things so we can learn something different. And that's hugely important. I love that. So if people want to find you, work with you, where are you? Where do you hang out? Where can they come and get to know you a bit better? Perfect. That's what it says on the tin. I am tuning in for that. Okay, thank you for that. All the links will be in the show notes below, everybody. So if you do want to go and find Kathryn and listen to that podcast and find out more about what Kathryn does, please go and click on the links. Now, before I let you go and get on with the rest of your day, I ask everybody, what joy do you want to leave behind? It is. I tend to use it now an awful lot, but it is a word, and I think people have the word mistaken as well. I think they think it's a Christmas word for that time of year we've got coming up. I think people think it's a fluffy, sparkly word, whereas for me, it's much, much deeper than that. It's authenticity and honesty and awareness of what your joy is and the bravery to admit it and live the life you want in the glow of it. You know, I think it's a much deeper word than it's given these days. Exactly. I love that. I love that. What a brilliant point to end today's conversation on. Thank you so much for coming on to the Joy Work Show, Kathryn. It definitely gave me a few things to think about. Should is going to be banned from this house. I'm even struggling to think of a time that you would use it positively. So it literally just needs to be banned, I think. So thank you so much for everything today and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Joy Work Show. I never underestimate where people choose to spend their time. I hope my conversation with Kathryn left you feeling inspired, encouraged, and maybe even ready to say goodbye to a few shoulds in your life. I know that is now a banned word in my household. As you probably heard, it blew me away, the negatives that came along with the word should. So perhaps you can think about it the next time you feel that creeping in for you. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that follow or subscribe button, because trust me, you won't want to miss what we've got coming up. 2025 is going to be a great year in the Joy Work Show world. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend or someone who could use a little extra courage to embrace their own path. Your support means the world to me. It helps us reach more people who, just like you, are ready to find the joy in their work and their lives. And hey, if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a review. I'd love to hear what you're loving about the show, what you'd like to hear more of in the future. Until next time, remember to honour your vision, take bold steps, and always find joy in the journey. We have all got this. See you soon.